So let's talk about the books that I recently read in the year of 2024. It's been a while since I made a video, but I'm back and I hope I'm here to stay once again. But let's just run through some of the books that I've read so far, and I just want to talk about them. But this would be in the style of a vlog, similar to the other one. And I'll just show you snippets of the travels that I had last year, but I didn't have a chance to show you guys, and talk about the books that I've read so far. So, I started off the year strong with one of the series that I loved since I was a kid. So I read the first 3 books of the Inheritance Cycle, and the whole point of reading this again was in fact to finish the series and finally read Inheritance. However, I stopped right at Brisinga and totally defeated my purpose. But it's okay, let's just hope that I will actually get to the 4th and final book this year. But what is the Inheritance Cycle about? It's about a boy named Erikson, and he's like a little farmer boy just living his life, trying to make a living. And one day while he was trekking in the woods and hunting, he finds like an odd shaped rock, and he doesn't know what to do with it. It's like, what is this? Why does it look like that? Why is it so heavy? And he just decides to bring it back. It looked kind of cool. And so when he brings it back, suddenly this thing decides to hatch, and he realizes this isn't a rock. It's a dragon's egg. And the problem with dragons in their society is that it is owned by the great evil J.R.R, if I'm not wrong. And nobody's supposed to normally have dragons anymore. Like, dragons aren't owned by the normal people anymore. And so he's launched into a whole situation that is politically, against him, and he has to fight, and, against J.R.R, who is the evil guy. So it is kind of a chosen one story. It's very reminiscent of fantasy of that time period. And a lot of people don't like this. Like, people who are starting to read fantasy nowadays would find that Erikson is kind of mediocre. But because I hold such a nostalgic factor towards this series, I enjoyed it a lot. And I managed to finally read Elders and Brisinga, which are the books that I did not manage to read when I was younger. So reading that and finally understanding like the growth for Erikson is quite nice. I think I agree with some where the quality of the book started to decrease over the course of each book, and I enjoyed it a little less each time. But seeing Erikson's growth was probably the thing that was missing for me for a long time, since I only saw how he was in book 1. I never knew how he would be in books 2 and 3, and I believe book 4 would be a good conclusion and probably a little tear-jerky for me. So I'm definitely gonna make time for Inheritance and finally finish this damn series. I think in general, in the year 2024, I had a pretty good head start at the first 3 months of it, but it started to dwindle over time. But the true reason behind my success was probably because I got really into audiobooks this year. So previously, I'm not the biggest audiobook fan, maybe because I need something to visually stimulate me as well as auditorily stimulate me. So when I only have one, I often drift off and not listen to whatever I'm listening to. Like, I can zone out when listening. Like, I can zone out to things and not pay attention to whatever I'm hearing. So it did not help. So, but this year, because my attention span has decreased again, which is not great, reading audiobooks has totally helped with my reading, because my mind is always elsewhere. So when I listen, I force myself to listen and pay attention to someone speaking. It really helped me take my mind off things. And so I was thinking, what are the best books that I could read that would help me with my audiobook journey? And what can I read that would not require so much brain cells, and will not require me to carry on in a series and requires minimal effort to just read one book and say, like, let's not move on to another one. It's just a standalone. So I've been reading a lot of standalone fantasy, and this is the time period where I picked up Brandon Sanderson's standalone fantasies for his project last year, which is Tress of the Emerald Sea and the Frugals, and the Frugal's Wizard's Handbook to Medieval England, if I'm not wrong. yeah, both were really fun. I read the reviews for all this and I know what kind of stories I'm getting into. And for Frugal's Wizard, it's not the best according to Brandon Sanderson fans, but I personally enjoyed it and I thought it was kind of funny because the part that people didn't like was actually Brando Sando's humor. But I don't know. I think Brandon Sanderson and I have like the same kind of humor, like the dad joke kind of lame humor. And I totally got it and I loved it. And I think it's because my expectations were so low that I enjoyed it as well. So, talking about what Tress is, Tress of the Emerald Sea actually follows a girl who decides to take up courage to save her beloved, who is possibly dead or lost at sea. So he went out to sea because he's trying to seek a fortune. If this sounds familiar, it's because it's kind of based off The Princess Bride, but if Buttercup had more resilience and authority over her life. So I thought that was really fun, and the imagery for everything is always great. I think Brandon Sanderson always has the ability to craft worlds that are so uniquely his, and there's nothing else that I've ever read that's so similar, except for, of course, the plot line. But the world itself is, of course, nothing like The Princess Bride, and is very, very much, very Brandon Sanderson, and very much his own. And I enjoy the imagery that he always gives, and it calls it a midnight sea, and how I imagine it to be is very similar to this Nintendo Switch game called Spiritfarers, where there's a part of the game where you go into this part of the sea and you catch like jellyfish, and the sea is very dark, filled with spore-like creatures, and it just feels very treacherous yet exciting. And that was the feeling Tress gave me. Like there's this whole treacherous element, feels very like Pirates of the Caribbean-y because it's a seafaring story, and you know Pirates of the Caribbean is very funny. And Tress has a little bit of element of fun and, you know, strange people, part of the crew and everything. So I enjoyed the story for what it was, but I didn't love it. And for Frugal Wizards, it's a story like about a lit RPG of sorts where, you know, a little bit of portal fantasy. Our main character gets transported to like a game-like version of medieval England and he has to like survive. So it's like this wizard's handbook to the survival of that game. And I think it's something different from what Sanderson has ever written, though the concept is not different and special from other things we've seen, like especially isekai, portal fantasies you see in anime, or any of like the other indie genre fiction like yeah. So I enjoyed it for what it was, but again, I did not love it. It was funny, like I anticipated it would be for myself. And other than that, I did not feel especially attached. I think there was some elements of, you know, soft moments with our characters where they think deeply about who they are as people, and I enjoyed that. I actually liked that he added that in to a very short novel, and that actually increased my enjoyment of the book. However, it's definitely not my favorite Sanderson, but I certainly did not hate it. I started many series last year as well, and one of the series was actually Lord of the Rings. You can check out my vlogs on my channel where I narrate the whole process of reading the 3 parts of the Lord of the Rings. But the one that I was up to read next was actually The Hobbit, and I finished that in a whole day because it was so short and I just listened to it from the start of the day to the end of the day and finished it. And what can I say other than the fact that I still have the issues that I have with it from Lord of the Rings, which is that, you know, sometimes the writing style for Mr. J.R.R. Tolkien can be very long-winded, and it's just like, you need to really pay attention sometimes, and it's just like, if you miss out, you won't really miss out much, but it's very rambly, especially with like his whole songs that the dwarves love to sing or whatsoever. It gets very rambly and you don't know if there's a real true purpose in listening or reading this book. But the thing is, what J.R.R. Tolkien always gives me is a fun time. And I can just get immersed in the story, just go with the flow, don't think too hard, and just experience everything as it goes. Even if I don't remember whatever happens in a story, I just remember that when I was reading it, I had the most fun time. You know, being on an adventure, just going through with it with everyone and feeling like you're part of the crew going to get the treasure that the dwarves want. So the story follows a hobbit named Mr. Bilbo Baggins. As you know, he's the uncle to Frodo Baggins, and it's following his journey together with the dwarves and Gandalf and whoever, I can't remember exactly, and they're trying to get the treasure for the dwarves or something from this dragon called Smaug, if I'm not wrong. And it's just a jolly good time, you know. J.R.R. Tolkien, if I'm not wrong, wrote this book for his kids, and it's meant to just give the children a, like I said, a jolly good time of being in a fantasy world, not thinking much of anything, and feeling like you're the one going on an adventure. And I think he achieved that with the book. Of course, everything else is like not to my taste, which is like his writing style can be a little bit windy, like I said. But I always feel like I'm immersed and I'm in there with the characters. And that is the whole point of reading, really. And he achieved it, and I enjoyed myself. That's all. I was on my kick of finding fantasy books that were just standalones, I decided to pick up a book from my favorite author of mine named John Scalzi. And it is Red Shirts by John Scalzi. And it's kind of like a satire novel based on Star Trek of some sorts. And I thought it was fun because I think the thing about John Scalzi is that he doesn't build an intense world. He just has really good dialogue and it just keeps you going because the characters are really funny and unserious people. And I think that's what I enjoy about John Scalzi's work, is that he doesn't delve too deeply into topics. He just wants you to have a good comedic time. And that's what Red Shirts provided for me. The next thing I read was a standalone but not a fantasy called Strings of Murder. And it follows two different characters who will come together, a detective and I think a police officer from Scotland, and they come together to solve this murder mystery regarding a violinist. And it's very funny. I don't know why it's so funny. I just randomly picked it up. I saw it in my library and thought, what is this? And decided to read the back and realized, hey, I think this might be something I like. And decided to pick it up. And I think I was lucky to have enjoyed this. But essentially, the audiobook is what did it for me. I think the audiobook narrator was really good. And I think he was so damn dramatic and expressive. And he made these unserious characters even more funny with the way he chooses to narrate their story and chooses to, be them. I think that's what makes it so fun. And because it's set in London and Scotland, we have all these accents going around, and I think that makes it even more fun and immersive, and it really feels like you're going on. And it really feels like you're going along with the characters. And I think for murder mystery, I'm not usually a kind of person who tries to find out what is the mystery and who's the killer or whatsoever. I just go along the flow and see if our characters are smart. In this case, I think they're just hilarious and they work well together. And it's the kind of book where I really didn't require any brain cells to listen and enjoy to it. I enjoyed the moments where our characters are just being funny and ridiculous and dramatic. And that's why I loved reading this so much. But of course, it's not the best book I've ever read. Has it changed my life? No. But did it give me an enjoyable time? It certainly did. I was initially talking about series that I was trying to finish, but there are series that I'm trying to start this year as well. And one of the most intimidating books that I've ever decided to read was by far Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson. And good lord, people are not wrong at how intimidating this series is. Before I went into this, I knew that I really will enjoy this because it's a big cast of characters. There's things going on in one part of the world and another part of the world, and they will all coincide and come together. And I knew that I would like this kind of story because I'm someone who needs to see the big picture and seeing things coming together and the mechanics of a machine and not just seeing how the machine functions. So, reading this has certainly put me in my place. I thought I might have been an advanced fantasy reader. I'm certainly not after reading Gardens of the Moon. That has humbled me tremendously. It's so difficult. So let me try to talk about Gardens of the Moon without exploding. So Gardens of the Moon follows a large cast of characters regarding a war that is happening between two different factions. And there's just a lot of moving parts and a prophecy that's happening at the same time. And it's just incredibly confusing, and I can't really tell you what it is. And that's just roughly what it is. So I had a really confusing time reading this. And to be frank, I almost gave up because I was not sure if my mental state was right for the book at that point. But I'm really, really thankful for the people who decided to keep up the Malazan Book of the Fallen Wikipedia page, because without you guys, I swear to God, I would have given up. So what I did to help myself get through it was to read, because the thing about Malazan is each chapter doesn't really coincide with the next. So you might read this chapter, you move on to the next chapter, it has nothing to do with the previous chapter. So I often get lost and not sure where I am in the story. And we're following 20, 30 over characters and their perspectives. So what I do is that I'll go back and read the wiki page, the chapter summary and be like, okay, I got it, before I start reading the chapter. And that really helps. And the thing about Malazan is that, you know, if you're not focusing at any point of the storytelling, you're gonna be completely lost. And the truth is, I'm not a person who can be completely 100% focused on a story. Like, maybe I'm a little bit like drifting off from it and then coming back to it. And that already makes you completely lost with the story if you're not focused. So I'm really glad for the Wikipedia page, because without it, I really couldn't have gotten through it. So thank you all to the moderators of the Malazan Wiki. Without you, I could not have finished the first book, and I would not, definitely have not, moved on to Dead House Gates. Thank you. other series I decided to start was She Who Became the Sun, because He Who Drowned the World got a lot of traction when it came out, I think recently, or is it last year, the end of the year? And people who loved this book was gearing up for the second one. And I thought, the whole premise of the story has always struck me in the heart, and I really wanted to read it, but I never prioritized it. So this is the year where I'm going to prioritize She Who Became the Sun. So She Who Became the Sun essentially follows a girl who has the prophecy of not being anything in life, and she will die young and there's nothing for her. So she's a nobody. While her brother is someone who will become somebody. He has a legacy. He has a great, brilliant future ahead of him. And she is not happy with that. So when her brother dies, she decides to take up his legacy and become the great person he was meant to be. She will not let her own prophecy stop her from being great. And I wished I could say that I like this more, but the only reason why I did not like it is probably because it very quickly turned into a military fantasy that I did not expect. And that's why I did not enjoy it as much. I thought there would be more, politics, talking about things, her being scheming, being a snake, trying to climb and everything. And I think we hardly ever saw that. It was a lot about scheming for the fight, fighting. And I was like, this is really not what I wanted. In that sense, I was severely disappointed. But by the end of the book, I knew I still needed to read He Who Drowned the World. The character arc is finally taking the correct stance and finally going towards the correct pathway that I wanted for her. That last 10% was everything I wanted from the book, and so I knew I needed to move on to the next one. But I'm probably not moving on to the next one so soon because I didn't really enjoy the first one, so I'm like, it can wait, I guess. I think it can wait, so I'm waiting. And surely the final book that I'm going to talk about is Fight Right by the Gottliebs. And this was the only book that I gave 5 stars this particular year. So far, the best book I've ever read. So it's a self-help book, which is very unlike me. I do not read self-help books because I just don't usually do that. It's not my style, But I felt like this book was, not say what I needed, but what I needed as a perspective on fighting. And I think it was brilliant. Like, they gave me so much insight into the science of fighting and how fighting is not the bad thing. It's how humans handle the fighting part of conflict that is bad. And I really appreciated that because I'm someone who believes that, conflicts is not the issue between human beings. We always will need conflicts in our lives because we need to stand up for what we believe in, and people are always going to put us down, right? There will be people who disagree, and that's where conflict starts. But I don't believe having conflicts is the issue. It's about how we handle conflicts. And though Fight Right is very, very much for like romantic couples and spouses, people in a relationship, I don't believe their principles can't be applied to any relationship we have in life with other people, whether it's your family or whatsoever. Because understanding people's conflict styles are exactly why we can reduce the really negative sentiment of conflict management. So I learned so much, and it was so insightful from page 1 to the last page, and I could not give it like anything lower than 5 stars. Anyways, that's pretty much all the books that I read in 2024 so far. Currently, what I'm reading is the second book to the Miss Bond series, which is The Well of Ascension. And spoiler alert, I don't know why, but the last book was just alright for me. But this book is killing it, and I'm loving it so much. I'm just eating it up like I've never eaten before, and I'm freaking hungry or something. And the other book I'm reading is Spirits of Vengeance by Rob J. Hayes, which I'm not enjoying as much. I think it's because I'm not in the right mood for it. And with Rob J. Hayes, he's a lot about like action, and not so much of character building or, those kind of things. And it's somewhat of a standalone in a series that he has. But that's roughly the spoiler alerts for anything I've given. I'll update you guys the next time. But I hope you enjoyed my wrap up of sorts, and I hope you enjoyed the little vlog bits where I'm talking about Japan and Hong Kong and showing you my little travel bits. Yeah, I really hope your reading year is going way better than I am. According to Goodreads, I'm 2 books behind, which is not making me very happy because this year I was hoping to read past my goal because I set the same goal as last year. But considering that I just changed my job, I think the stress is getting to my head. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.